So today we're going to be looking at House of Leaves. Now, before we jump into this monster of a novel, I would like to first preface by saying that if you haven't read the book, you really should buy a copy of it before looking into any details about it. That's going to give you the best experience when reading through and understanding House of Leaves. The reason I'm making this video is because I, want to acknowledge how much influence I think it has over my own work, but I also want to discuss the larger impact that I think it has on contemporary literature in our age. I can't really think of another book that, or any real piece of work, even movies or music, that encapsulates this era. If there even is a way that you can do that, I think that House of Leaves is a work that does, on some level, get a very broad and epic understanding of what it's like in today's world now. If there were ever to be a book that would be defining, a lot of that is the story, but it's also the way that the story is told, which in the book is through many separate characters and storylines, which have an underlying mystique to them of being contained within the same book, with being contained within House of Leaves. What you find out, of course, anybody who's read it, is that one story is covering up, but also metaphorically explaining the larger, more consuming narrative of the piece. That's something that is widely expressed in, I think, probably the most penetrating symbol in the book, which is the labyrinth. Because reading House of Leaves is in many ways like navigating a labyrinth. It's meant to be understood in so many different ways, with all the different illusions, expanded appendix, and also even reading through the index. Once you've read the book and you go back through, reading through different terms, leave different impacts on different people, and different things call out to different people, is like navigating in a labyrinth. Everyone gets to an end corridor. There's no way to escape it, but they get to a different corridor while they read through the book. Way that the house expands into all these rooms and hallways and corridors that are really characterized by nothing. Strangely paired with all of these illusions that these mainly fake references that the author uses. He pairs these references with always these characters moving through darkness, as well as the narrative of the story, or the editor of the story, compiler, whatever you want to call him, Johnny Truant, in his life, which is extremely tortured. He's obviously not very mentally well. This darkness, and what he's able to do is give the darkness meaning, give nothingness meaning. Darkness, nothingness, big wide open areas, geometry that makes no sense, landscapes that make no sense, that could never be constructed. Pairing all of that, causing this anxiety that the book is very good at putting you into, pairing it with fake academics writing about and interpreting what you're reading, on some level satirizes academia on a whole, showing that all this highly dissected material that academia loves to do, to dissect things, very fully and broadly and methodically, does kind of, in our era, lend itself to a spiraling sprawl of emptiness, or corridors that people follow through and they go down as well. What the real story behind the story in House of Leaves is Johnny Truant's story. At the very end, the connection with his mother, which is also expanded in the next book, and the letters that she was writing, which there is, at the end of House of Leaves, there are some letters of her character. Anyone who's had a traditional literature background, to have a story that misleads the reader superimposes itself over another story, which then the main story is just footnotes to, would seem counterintuitive. Why would you not just want to clearly tell the story? You want to give a sense of dread, of a deeper sense of horror, a deeper sense of absence and distance. This is the way that you do it. This is the way you can artistically do it. And with words, it's great at, because words, they're boring. Even the best poetry, a lot of people are never going to want to read or care about, because they're not colorful. There aren't pictures there. It's your imagination constructing things out of the words. And the words can be interpreted in many different ways. So if you don't have a natural draw to words, and you reading them and using your own mind to understand them, all of that is empty, has little meaning. That's what literature lends itself best to. I think that's what reading lends itself best to create something that could be interpreted in many ways. Many people who do go into academia, who do go into universities and pursue degrees, they're very interested in developing a deeper understanding over the topics that they're looking at, to become successful in breaking down these and understanding these topics very fully. House of Leaves is a way in which we can reach deeper understandings by going into the darkness, by going into things that we don't know, by exploring. Will Davidson's character is the one who constructs the documentary and who goes into the labyrinth and creates a whole team to go into the labyrinth and explore it. Through his character resurrects in the story is human exploration, human desire to explore even the most scary, dreadful areas of the world. Instead of becoming the walls, Davidson is someone who's actively participating and seeing how they're shifting all the time. And Mark Z. Danielewski is concerned with how humanity is able to interpret and understand things that are already dead, cold, things that have happened in the past, architecture, whatever, these empty buildings that we've constructed that just seem to fade away as time goes on, and sees a world that all it does is shift the different walls of this labyrinth continuously and perpetually. And what he's not seeing is many people actually going in, exploring the labyrinth, because it's dark, it's cold. They describe the labyrinth. Never goes above 5 degrees freezing or below 5 degrees freezing. There's growls that come through. That sound like there's something in the darkness. There's a staircase that descends all the way down into just another space where there's nothing. So we get a lot of descriptions of the labyrinth, all of these footnotes to made up books, made up work, as readers go through it and try to figure out a way to connect it to Johnny Truant's stories, because you read these spiraling stories that he tells that even he says he lies about, and we don't really get to understand his character fully until the very end of the book. And once we do reach the end, that's when we realize all of this is about, what this cover-up is. And I think the book is meant to just showcase there is a lot of forgotten stories. There are a lot of covered up details, and there are many neglected lives. What can we do if we feel pain, we feel anxiety, we feel all these negative emotions? Is there a way that we can actually confront these things and work through them and understand them in a way that brings us closer together, closer to love? The main character and his mom are so important in this story, and their connection is so important in this story because at a very young age, Johnny, the character who is assembling all of this, he is scarred for life because of his mother's accident. His body, his arms are completely scarred. This leads to his mother having a mental breakdown, never really fixes itself, it becomes more severe, and she's taken away from him, and for the rest of his life he's really never able to live with his mother or get his mother out of the institute she's in. She's in the institute for the rest of her life. He visits her, I think, one time, and for the rest of the time their only connection is the letters that they write to one another. And that's it, and then she dies. The author of the book has a lot of stories like this folded in the stories always end on a note that's can't really be interpreted as happy or unhappy, but just in a lot of ways very realistic. And that's something that really the whole book is meant to interrogate and try to get us to understand as well what it's like to really be present and grapple and struggle with these stories in our own life as well that we have to confront on a daily basis. Most people have to confront. There's no solace for Johnny Truant. There's no... The one thing that he gets is that people do start to read his story, which is right at the end once we've also read his story. And that's the one bit of reprieve that he really gets in his story. That, and also a reinterpretation of love. It not being something that needs closeness, that needs normal intimacy, but there can be distance there. There can be extreme love that occurs between humans with there being lots of distance as well involved in these relationships. There's a lot of different things that are in this book, but really the main focus is the words and how they're assembled on the page. It really is like an experience. A lot of people don't really associate with it being an experience, especially with academia being something that is just churning out so many of journals and articles every single year. It seems to just expand more and more. It's not none of that is stuff that is really exploratory. It's more about stuff that is just a wall. It's just a wall that is meant to stand up and just kind of cut you off from exploring this wide open area. And I think many people have found it to be something that is damaging to love. In House of Leaves, the purpose here is to try to, instead of continue along the track of just humans becoming, in the modern era, less connected with one another, more obsessed with social media and all these other things that I feel like is just pounding into everybody's skull, is that as a society we're just trajectory moving forward into this darker, empty world filled with little feeling, little emotion. Instead, trying to create a way in which this distance and this pain and suffering and darkness and all of that, there's a way that love is actually becoming stronger and it's becoming something that's more beautiful and deeper. We have to choose to understand. We could just ignore it too, but as we live through our life, we've experienced the same things. It would make sense for us to understand it. Okay, that's a lot. This is it, signing off. Let's get these words on the page. Okay, everybody, so this is House of Leaves. Look forward to discussing more work with you guys. See you later.